Hello and welcome to the Nialler9 podcast. Myself and Andrea Cleary here. How are you, Andrea?
I'm good, Niall. How are you?
Good.
Autumn is here. It's raining. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's exactly what I expect from you now. This is your entire personality.
We've been doing. I don't know how many years we've been doing this podcast exactly, but yeah, it's time you expected it from me.
Good question. How long have we been doing this podcast?
3 years. How many
together?
How many of those Christmas things have we been doing?
I
think we've done 3 of them.
God, this would be the 4th, is it?
Yeah,
I think it's the 4th one.
We should start keeping.
I don't know.
Keeping
We'll have to look at that. But it's episode 226, and I must look at how many episodes we've done together and figure that one out. But yeah,
what's today's episode?
We are going to be talking about a subgenre of electronic music, of dance music, of electro specifically, called Latin freestyle. Maybe it's something you've heard before, maybe not. For me, I actually wasn't that familiar with it, but I was familiar with the songs, but I wasn't familiar with the term. So the reason we are talking about Latin freestyle today is because there's a compilation coming out called Latin Freestyle New York, Miami, 1983 to 1992. It's just one of the things that our guest on this week's pod has been doing and is up to. The guest is Bob Stanley. He is the acclaimed music journalist behind the books Yeah, The Story of Modern Pop and Let's Do It, The Birth of Pop, along with the Bee Gees, Children of the World. And he's also known for being in Saint Etienne as well. So a musician in his own right as well. He is also a music journalist as well. And as we said, he puts together compilations. And if you've never read Yeah, The Story of Modern Pop, I would urge you to do so. It is one of the most exhaustive books about music. It takes the 50 years of chart music in the UK from 1950 to 2000 and uses that as its limitation and its guide in which to talk about music from those 50 years, from moving sequentially and chronologically through the charts and discussing what was popular, largely what was popular. What isn't popular isn't really there, but allowing that as a framework to learn about the history of music. It was one of those books I read on holidays maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I actually have the copy of mine here, which I've given away. You can see now it's kind of getting a little bit...
It's a bit tattered, yeah.
It's getting a bit stale looking and tattered looking because it's been to many countries. I've given this to a few people. Yeah, it's nice and big. Here's a big flick. Yeah, nice big flick of that. A great book, a really good one. And because Bob Stanley is the guest, Faber are actually reissuing both of those books. Yeah, and 2022's Let's Do It, The Birth of Pop, which is basically the 1900 to 1950s version of Yeah, talking about all the genres of music that define the story of pop music and the birth of pop music from 1900 to the mid 50s. So yeah, both of those books are coming out in paperback, along with a new chapter with Yeah. It is a really interesting book, and so we will talk a little bit to Bob about the book as well, but also mostly Latin freestyle. And before we get into that, I think it's probably worthwhile giving you a little bit of a background into Latin freestyle.
Yes, please.
So freestyle, it grew out of the electro sound of the 80s. So we're talking about early 80s. You have disco leading into kind of hip hop and more house music. And amongst those tributaries, there is electro forming as well. Electro, you hear the likes of Kraftwerk, African Bambaataa. So there's influences coming from hip hop, there's influence coming from electronic music. And then as disco becomes made with instruments electronically, like drum machines and synthesizers and samplers and stuff like that, we start to hear electro music. So electro could be stuff like Egyptian Lover or, as I said, Planet Rock, African Bambaataa, a big seminal kind of birthing song really for electro music. But interesting to me, I knew some of these songs that we're going to talk about as electro, 80s electro music, but I didn't really know them as Latin freestyle. So Latin freestyle itself is very much a subgenre of electro. It uses kind of staccato rhythms, Morse code synth hooks, and usually female frequently Latina vocals. So that's where where the term comes from, Latin freestyle. It's got kind of proto house piano lines, Cuban percussion, big high emotion, very much like electronic disco, high energy stuff. It's got a 60s girl group influence in terms of how the singers often have teenage matters of the heart to sing about, and they also sound like maybe they're teenagers a lot of the time. These are largely untrained singers who are brought in by producers to sing these songs, and as such they have a kind of an innocence to them as well. And sometimes it kind of sounds like an 80s pop version of the 60s girl group kind of style. So as I said, Bob Stanley has a compilation coming out called Latin Freestyle, out now actually, called Latin Freestyle, and lots of interesting music in there we're going to discuss with him. Here's an example of a song from the kind of vibe that we're talking about.
We started dancing and love put us into a groove. As soon as we started to move, the music played while our bodies displayed through the dance. Then love picked us out for romance. I thought it was clear the plan was we would share this feeling just between ourselves. But when the music changed, the plan was rearranged. He went to dance with someone else. We started dancing and love put us into a groove. But now he's with somebody new. What does love want me to do? Love said, let the music play. He won't get away. Just keep the groove and then he'll come back to you again. Let the music play. He won't get away.
That is Shannon with Let the Music Play, considered one of the first big Latin freestyle records. Interestingly, as we'll discuss a bit further on, I want to just take a moment to discuss Madonna's debut album, because that is actually one of the reasons why Latin freestyle became what it is. I think people know that Madonna has a penchant for delving into different sounds and mining other people's or other genres and sounds and trends for music that she makes herself. But in this case, for her debut album 1983, she was hanging around the clubs in New York and met John Jellybean Benitez, who was instrumental. Apparently they had a 2-year romance, but he was also instrumental in the album, the self-titled Madonna album. And so, yeah, that album contains tracks like Borderline, Lucky Star, Holiday. So we're talking about, like, these are songs that have some Latin freestyle vibe to it. I'm going to play a couple of just a little snippets of some of this stuff just to hear from the debut album from Madonna. This is a song called Burning Up from the album. You can hear a different 12-inch remix, so you can kind of hear the vibe of what we're talking about here.
I'm burning up for your love, for your love. You're always closing the door. Well, that only makes me want you more. And day and night, I cry for your love. You're not convinced that that is enough to justify my wanting.
Also on the same album, a song called Everybody.
Get up and do your thing, everybody. Come on, dance and sing, everybody. Get up and do.
And on the more, pop end, big smash hit singles, what about this one, Holiday?
Celebrate. If we took a holiday, took some time to celebrate.
Now, Jellybean would go on to make some of his own music, including this one, which is called Sidewalk Talk, which actually features Madonna on it. You can hear in the backing vocals.
Sidewalks talk, you better watch what you do, what you do. 'Cause the sidewalk talk can get carried
So yeah, this kind of music was Madonna's breakthrough, and it became kind of a blueprint for a lot of people in terms of club music and dance music, but also this became very much pop music in the US. And I think as Bob discusses with our chat with him, this is not music that really, in terms of the term Latin freestyle, really made itself known outside of the US, which is interesting. Certainly there are a lot of electro records from that time. That here's one called Al Knifefish from Hashim. You might know this one, you might have heard this one. So yeah, but most of the Latin freestyle stuff was really female vocal driven, very much that kind of very big pop music. So we're going to jump into a chat with Bob now about Latin freestyle and some of his writing work as well. And you'll hear some of the music as we talk about it as well. If you are interested in this music and want a little accompanying playlist to Latin freestyle, we'll be offering one up on patreon.com/Nialler9 to accompany this podcast. So consider joining us from $5 a month, supporting us. It's really invaluable what you do in terms of support. It is really great when people do so, and we always really appreciate it. As I said before, there's many different other reasons to join, including our Discord, where you can chat to people about music directly who are actually really sound and nice. And yeah, come and have a look. Patreon.com/Nialler9. It won't cost you much.
Don't pay for Twitter. Pay for Discord instead. Pay for us. We're nice. We're not
Come
billionaires.
join a nice community that isn't going to shout at you and call you names.
Exactly.
Yeah, let's chat to Bob Stanley.
When I hear music, it makes me dance. You got the music, here's my chance. When I hear music, it makes me dance. You got the music, here's my chance. I went to the disco, couldn't believe my eyes. I looked on the dance floor and saw so many guys. I asked myself, could this really be? Whether it is or not, I'm going to see.
Bob Stanley, how are you doing? Nice to chat to you. I am interested in, seeing as you have had to revisit, the story of modern pop recently, a vast history of music and a serious undertaking at 800 plus pages. Revisiting the book, was there anything that struck you? Anything that you felt like you had omitted, or anything you avoided, or an artist you enjoyed that maybe you didn't then?
There was, reading it again, there wasn't anything I thought I got horribly wrong. There were some chapters where I've sort of grown to like the things I was writing about a fair bit more than I liked them when I was writing the book. So a lot of progressive rock. I wish I'd added a little bit too. But I mean, generally, I didn't really think there was anything horribly wrong with it. So I thought the best thing was just not to alter anything in the main book,
Right.
and just to add like a new introduction saying people I regretted not including.
Who did you regret not including?
Hall and Oates. I mean, it's kind of like it's not like I forgot to write about Elvis or anything. But there were some people, I don't know, Gordon Lightfoot. I think mostly when people have died in the years since I wrote the book, I was like, oh, I wish I'd included them. I wish I'd just like put a one-liner to say how much something. You know.
But you can't really include everything because it's such such a vast period of time as well to do that. What I want to know is, have you come around on Steely Dan yet?
No, I'm afraid not.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe try again.
We're the spectrum of Steely Dan listeners here. Niall's a big fan. I'm we did a podcast where he introduced me to Steely Dan, and I'm kind of coming around to them a bit. There's a few songs I like, and then you're at the very other end of the spectrum. So
no, there's definitely a few songs I like. There's definitely Bad Sneakers. There's quite a few songs I like, but I think it's and I can also appreciate that they kind of fit in with a kind of New Yorkness that I generally really like. But there's something just a bit too sort of smug and dry about it. And
I mean, I totally get it. For me, it was like my dad is really into Steely Dan and always has been. So it came from that for me. And I was like, don't know if I would have got into them had I not, discovered that him. But then I realized like in the last 10 years, it seems to be like Steely Dan became cool again. And everyone else was like, "Oh, well, everyone's really into Steely Dan again."
Yeah,
like,
we've all been listening to Steely Dan this whole time, like since when?
But something else you did recently was release a compilation of called Latin Freestyle New York, Miami, 1983 to 1992. Now, I love disco, I love electro, I love hip hop, I love Italo disco. So I want you to talk to me a little bit about this, about Latin freestyle. To be honest, it wasn't a term or a genre, a subgenre name I was totally familiar with, but I do know the songs. So, I mean, where did you arrive and where did you come from with this compilation?
Well, again, I knew quite a few of the songs before I knew the genre name. I think the genre name is one of the things, like doo-wop and a bunch of other genre names, which only sort of came about after the initial burst of the music had happened. And it was people in America, friends in America, who play me a lot of things that are included in this compilation. And said this is called freestyle, and I was like, that's new to me. And similarly, like coming, in the last few years since I knew what the genre name was, I still haven't found many people in Britain anyway who know what on earth freestyle is. So I thought, I mean, there's a lot of big American hits on it as well, and in America it probably looks a bit like, now that's what I call music, because there's not really a couple of obscure things on there. Most of them are like sort of like top 20 hits. But yeah, for whatever reason, a lot of the music never caught on here, and the genre name certainly never became commonplace here. There's things like, Point of No Return by Expose, I think was a big club hit that people would remember, even if it wasn't a chart hit. But the very starting point for freestyle was Let the Music Play by Shannon, which is basically, I always thought it was an electro record. It was basically an electro record. But I think that was such a huge hit. It effectively created a genre of its own, which people like, Jelly Bean Benitez and other producers in kind of sort of Spanish Harlem started off doing in New York in the mid 80s, and then that kind of moved down to Miami in the late 80s, early 90s, and the sound of the music barely changed. It's and I think the records are still being made that sound like that as well. It's so cowbell still sounds great, so why change it?
So in your liner notes for the compilation, you said it was the oral equivalent of a can of thirst quenching quattro or a Spanish Harlem dance off, and it became the electronically constructed bridge between disco and house. So what are the characteristics of Latin freestyle for you?
It's certainly the backing tracks are very much based on electro. If you think of like John Roby, Africa Bambaataa productions, that's what the initial records sound like, and it didn't really change much after that. They tend to be minor key. The bulk of them are female vocals, which I've only included female vocals on this because I think they work better for me personally. And lyrically, they're very straight ahead songs about love and dancing, like a real throwback, which like Let the Music Play is. I mean, basically, if you know that, then you've got a very good idea of what the rest of the album sounds like.
Yeah.
How do you go about making a compilation? Were there songs that you had to leave out, or were you kind of free to include as many as you wanted?
Well, there's always going to be things you can't clear, Shannon being the main one here, but I figured that because that was the only big hit on there, only big British hit, it wasn't really a great loss because people already know it. But no, we were very lucky. There's a woman at Ace Records called Liz Buckley who does all that tricky side of things. And so I just give her like a dream, like a wish list.
Yeah.
And she works her way through it. And if there's like things she can't clear, she'll let me know. But that one was remarkably straightforward. And it was really just friends in America playing me things, going through YouTube to find other things. It's like, it's the magic of the internet. It's you don't have to sort of splash out blindly and pay $20 for a record you've never heard to see if it's any good, because it can just like check it out online.
Yeah. Are there any of these tracks that you've included on the compilation that were relatively new to you through that kind of discovery process, or were they all familiar to you?
Well, I think that my favourite one I discovered, I was just trying to find ones that were more obscure, and I found Don't Be Shy by Janelle. Basically, I think her and the producer like pressed up something like 100 copies of that at the time, and she still got like sort of 20 of them.
Wow.
Sells them online for like like $200 a go, because that's what style collectors will pay for it. And she was lovely. She's like a real estate agent. She did this record when she was much younger, and can't believe anyone remembers it or even knows it. She never played anywhere outside of Boston. That's as far as she got. How
were you able to find her then in the first place?
Now you're asking me. I can't remember. I mean, again, just like using Google and trying to track people down. Janelle Snarsky, her name is. I think I found that she was selling the records. It was apparent she was selling the records herself. So I just wrote to her.
Right.
And said, could we include this on a compilation? And she was thrilled. So yeah, she's been a big supporter in America. I think she's probably bought about 30 copies for herself and her friends.
Yeah, why not? I mean, so you said it like when you chatted to her, she said they only pressed 100 records of it. So really, really obscure records then in that way.
Yeah. The bulk of them, like I said, were major hits, but that one definitely wasn't. But it's great. I mean, I suppose another thing that Freestyle sounds like is the first Madonna album. That's a very fun.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Yeah, because there's definitely a crossover there, and like that album is what 1983, I think, is it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And Jelly Bean Benitez was involved in that as well. So I mean, there's very clearly and that was quite early. I was kind of thinking about it. I was like, maybe she, as Madonna's known to do, is to like jump on a trend throughout her career, but it didn't seem to be the case this way. It was like she was kind of doing it almost first, or certainly using that style before many other people were.
Yeah, definitely. I think she was just like hanging out at the Danceteria and hearing Jelly Bean DJing and just like wanting to get noticed by dressing up, and Lisa apparently did the same thing, who also became a big star, bigger American than she was here. It's just one of those things like people sort of getting noticed, going in the studio, doing a vocal and having a hit. I mean, much to love Madonna, I think it's like, she that was the best way for her to get attention, I suppose, or get noticed in the first place. And the records were strong enough that she then could like keep moving her way up from there, I suppose.
Yeah. And she's still going.
No, she's amazing.
Other records that are kind of related to this are the Africa Bambaataa, Planet Rock would be apparently is considered Latin freestyle. Now, I'm interested in the New York and Miami duality of that. Like where obviously, we have the clubs that people know about in New York around that time, but why Miami? Where does that come from? Where's the influence there from?
I wouldn't say Planet Rock is freestyle, so it's a big influence on freestyle.
Yeah, sorry, big influence. Yeah,
it's definitely electro.
the start of electro.
And also the start of early hip hop. I mean, like it's so people tend to forget how hip hop and electro were so connected at that point.
We know a place where the nights are hot. It is a house of both females and males. Both young and old. For the disco, the DJ plays your favorite blast, takes it back to the past. Music's magic. Poof, bump, 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 get bumped with some blast. People.
I think the Miami thing was purely that it was running out of steam as a chart trend, and people in Miami loved the sound and just carried on making records there, and it had a second wind in the late 80s, early 90s. I think the Zet Menendez record on there is from about 91 or 92.
Yeah.
But you couldn't really tell. It doesn't really sound any different to the records made in 84, 85. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just simple as that, really. I think it was just a big sort of Latin youth sound, and people wanted the thing to keep going.
Yeah.
And what is the success to this sound? What did this sound kind of lead into in your opinion? Like in terms of what the artists go on to do themselves, if they do continue in music, or what is the natural successor?
Oh, natural successor. I don't know. I mean, I think the initial records really just became such a part of the American pop sounds in the mid 80s. So like "Tell It to My Heart" by Taylor Dayne.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a borderline freestyle record, but like the rest of her output is nothing like that. So people were making records in that style, or even Robin Gibb. The second Robin Gibb album has got
I was looking at that earlier. Yeah, there's a few tracks on that.
Which is a great album, but it's like something I hadn't really thought about until I was listening to it, thinking, God, he's really on the money here. It's like 1984.
Yes, but so who produced that record though? There was somebody that produced a record that I have it here somewhere.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't remember. But it's somebody who produced freestyle records.
Yeah, Chris Barbosa.
Yes,
that's 1984. Secret Agent. I was listening to that earlier. I was like, yeah, you can very clearly hear that.
Yeah, he did let the music play. So yeah,
there you go. For me, I love Italo Disco, and I see a lot of similarities here with Italo in the way that in the stories that you tell in the liner notes, there are people who are interchanged sometimes after the song is released in a live capacity. And then the way that it kind of, like, the singers are literally just that. They're not the pop stars. They're the singers. They are people who are brought in by a producer a lot of the time to sing the songs. And whether they're discovered in a record shop or otherwise, like there was one story in I think it's the first track on the expose, said the original trio were kicked out. The Miami trio were kicked out, so the entire lineup changed, and the original trio went to an early show in San Jose and were heckling the new band. It's a bit like the Sugar Babes if they turned up now at the when the height of that was happening and the people were changing all of their members and like turn up to heckle the new members. So like it's not something that you hear about these days, but I think in terms of like certainly Italo, I can hear there's a lot of similarities there for me. Like the likes of the Flirts.
This dream of love is restless, but really it's so strong. I wanna give you all my love before it's too far gone. Our love is like a lion, it's hungry for its prey. Come on and show your loving, I really can't wait.
kind of borderline in that way of, a producer who puts together a band or puts together singers and creates a body of work, and sometimes, uses multiple aliases. Certainly, did you see a lot of that in Latin freestyle?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's something that goes right away through the history of pop, I suppose. I mean, you think of like, He's a Rebel by the Crystals hasn't got the crystals on it. It's Darlene Love and the Blossoms singing, but they put the crystals on the label because they'd already had a hit. So it's nearly always women as well. It's very much male producer and female singer dynamic. So I mean, you think that probably happens less now, but like you said with the Sugababes, I mean that recent Michael Cragg book about sort of
we had Michael on a while ago.
It's actually really quite depressing, a lot of it, because it was just like producers and managers taking kids who'd almost intentionally picked people who didn't seem that bright, not including the Sugababes there, and so they could manipulate them and like just put them on a low wage and work them to death. They have like a dozen hits and disappear. So it's kind of not really that different, but I think certainly female performers and girl groups in the 60s and the freestyle acts and Italo disco acts. It's a pretty common thread right through the history of pop, I think.
Yeah, and in terms of UK kind of influence, then you can hear maybe, I think this is also the same with Italo as well, but also perhaps Latin freestyle scene as Neil Tennant would have been very familiar, like Pet Shop Boys, Domino Dancing, stuff like that. Very much kind of has some of the same vibe of this music as well.
Domino Dancing, absolutely.
Arthur Baker produced some of the New Order stuff, for example. So Confusion is a track I've seen mentioned around in the orbit of Latin freestyle as well. What is it for you that you made you want to delve into this?
Well, there are quite a lot of what look like sort of petrol station compilations, I suppose, in America. It's one of those genres where the artwork looks terrible and there's dozens of them. So I just wanted to do one that was, especially because it's not a known genre here, really. Was do one that looked quite classy, and we used the font from the Street Sounds Electro compilations, which seemed like the right font to use, things like that. To just package it nicely and tell the story and get the people's stories across in the sleeve notes. That's kind of, I've been doing compilations with Ace for about 6 or 7 years now, and I kind of think of them as sort of like social history almost. It's when you put something like this together, it's like it's a real opportunity to like get people's stories across and explain how it fits in with other music, the history of music, and also with what was going on in at the time, outside of recording studios and clubs. So it's just a genre I'm really fond of, and I love melodies. I like dance music, and I like good tunes, and I like female vocals. So it kind of ticks a lot of my boxes. Yeah.
Is there what, if you were to point to like your favorite? Do you have a favorite Latin freestyle song? Or is there one group that stands out to you? Because it's not really. It's mostly like singles, really, isn't it? So
not especially. I don't think there's a group. It's there's a lot of kind of one-off records. I don't know. Two of Hearts by Stacey Q I love, which is, I can't remember where she's from. She's definitely not Latina anyway. But it's almost like a cash-in record. It's just like her voice is very, like Madonna's, quite squeaky and quite minimal sounding. It's incredibly catchy. I think it was like a top 5 hit in America. It was a huge hit in America, and I don't know why it didn't happen here. But there's I couldn't really pick a favourite. That one kind of stands out because it's not that typical, I suppose. Point of No Return by Expose. You really can't go wrong with that.
Very good.
Fascinated by Company B is terrific.
Yeah, I think that still stands up for me, and I think I've heard a lot of remixes and edits of Company B Fascinated in the last couple of years as well. And
really?
Yeah. There's a guy from Northern Ireland which called Jordan who's done a Fascinated edit, and it's great. It sounds brilliant, and it's one of those songs that I was like, I know I'd heard it before. I think there's some of these songs that are used in like that we used back in TV ads back then, and I was like, oh, that's so.
I had the same experience listening to the compilation. I mean, Two of Hearts I definitely knew because I love that song. But listening through it, there was even just little snippets. And I'm like, okay, that feels familiar, even if the rest of the song doesn't feel familiar. So it's a sound that definitely feels like it's not nostalgic, even though it's not music I listened to. It's just among the culture. It's around me. So it's nice to have it all in one place.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. I mean, it's a very kind of like classic 80s sound. It's like it could possibly come from any other decade. But I mean, a lot of classic 80s sounds I really don't like. You know, like the Phil Collins drum sound I really like. So it's nice to have this genre that kind of goes right the way through the 80s as well, and has just maybe uses the technology in a really clean and melodic way. I think rather than clunky and clumsy and like
they're quite crisp songs. They're quite like crisp is the way I describe them.
The right word. I'd agree.
Yeah, and you were making the point as well. Like you think that some of the vocals are obviously, they're not totally amazingly like professional voices as well, which lends
they're
it
sweet.
to it. Yeah, sweet vocals as well. And that kind of lends the kind of teenage angle as well in terms of the lyrics, whether they're songs about boys or just having a dance. Like it's very much like, these are small stakes songs, but
they feel like they're about girlhood, they feel like, and maybe that's where the nostalgia comes in for me. Like they do feel like the kind of thing that, and in an imagined girlhood, no matter where you live in the world, this is the kind of pop record you'd be dancing around to in your bedroom,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Bob, thanks very much for taking out time to talk to us.
Thanks so much.
Always just sweet passion.
Thanks, Bob Stanley, for coming on and sharing some of his knowledge about Latin freestyle. We heard a lot of songs there, a lot of references to stuff. Like I said, patreon.com/909 if you want to access to the playlist. I think I have about 50 songs that are related to that Latin freestyle. So yeah, come and say hello on patreon.com/909.
Well, we're going to be discussing a lot next week in our end of the month.
Yes, next week is our end of the month, where we will talk about music,
which is hard to believe. Where has the month gone?
It's been a busy musical month, I have to say.
Yeah, you and I saw each other in real life this month at the Peter McGann show, which we'll no doubt discuss next week. You're gonna, I'm sure, do a fringe roundup for us as well, because you've been out and about in the town.
Listen, we're not finished yet. It's still on.
No, that's it.
It's still on.
Yeah,
and
we've Culture Night on Friday as well.
Culture Night Friday. I am going to the National Concert Hall show, Music for 18 Machines Reimagined with Simon Cullen, at 7 o'clock. I think there's tickets still available for that. Loads of other things happening on Culture Night. I'll have a Culture Night guide on 909.com as well if you're interested in seeing what music stuff is on. And Lumo is on Saturday as well. We're doing Lumo Club. So Saturday, September 23rd at Tengu with a special guest, January Winters. It's time for a dance. It's not winters yet, it's autumn, but it's winters in the club.
January autumns.
So we're gonna. It's my favorite time to be in a nightclub. It's never too warm. Yeah. It's always nice, and it's nice and dark. Love it.
But you're still in out of the cold.
In out of the cold.
It's a good time.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Andrea.
Thanks, Niall.
Bye.
See you next week. Bye. That's it for us. Well, we're going to be discussing a lot next week in our end of the month, which is hard to believe. Where has the month gone? Yeah. You and I saw each other in real life this month at the Peter McGann show, which we'll no doubt discuss next week. You're going to, I'm sure, do a fringe roundup for us as well, because you've been out and about in the town. No, that's it. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And we've Culture Night on Friday as well. So. Mm-hmm. January autumns. Yeah. But you're still in out of the cold. It's a good time. Yeah. Thanks, Niall. We'll see you next week. Bye.